Something else that we're going to be learning about is how to put on PPE, protective or personal protective equipment is what PPE stands for. You need to know what that acronym stands for. If I at any point in time say PPE, you need to know that it means personal protective equipment, right? It's important when you're putting on PPE that you're doing it correctly. It's critical for safety. Direct hand contact exposure, you're going to put gloves on, right? Potential splashes, sprays, or droplets, you're going to put on gowns, lab coats, safety glasses, and face shields. If it's airborne transmission, you need to wear a face shield or a mask. Those are the times in which you need to wear certain PPE. All right, now we're going to move on to sanitization. The process of washing and scrubbing to remove materials. Now, on your test for the finish, the final of this whole section, when we get into the big kahuna at the end, there's a question on there that asks you what the difference is. Like, which one is disinfection, which one is sanitization, which one is sterilization? Because they're different. All three are different, right? So do yourselves a favor and pay extreme attention to this section of content, because there are three separate things you're going to be learning here that are very critical to what you're going to be doing as a medical professional. Sanitization is the process of washing and scrubbing to remove material. It is not disinfection and it is not sterilization. Do not confuse these. You will wear latex or vinyl gloves, double gloving as necessary. Utility gloves recommended during sanitization of items and equipment to protect hands from contamination and injury. Now, going back to your Wednesday assignment, the number one question that I got was, why is she allowed to wear the same gloves all day long? Well, she's not. Those were utility gloves, and she was wearing them only when she was doing the sanitization and disinfection process. Once the sterilization was complete, she was never touching the instruments with those gloves. Does that make sense? So she was allowed to keep the same gloves on during the cleaning process the entire day. So again, sanitization is the process of washing and scrubbing to remove materials. In the disinfection and sterilization process, that's part one. We take our instruments, we scrub them with a brush, right, in a solution to get all the debris off of the material, all of the debris off of the equipment, and then you disinfect it, and then you sterilize it, right? That's how we move in the chain. All right, sanitization items should be rinsed in cool water, soaked in warm detergent solution for about 20 minutes, washed and scrubbed thoroughly with a brush, rinsed in warm to hot water, and then dried completely. You need to know this. Like, you really need to know this. This is super important. Disinfection is the process by which disease-producing microorganisms or pathogens are killed. All right, I'm going to repeat that because it's really important. Disinfection is the process by which disease-producing microorganisms or pathogens are killed. Items are placed in a chemical solution to destroy bacteria. Disinfectants used on objects, not on people. Large instruments like scopes and heat-sensitive items that can't withstand the autoclaving process are the items that we disinfect. So if you work for a general surgeon and you're doing a sigmoidoscopy with a flexible sigmoidoscope, you got to sanitize. You have to clean those scopes, right? You can't just use something that you used on another patient down the road. So in this situation, you would submerge the item in a disinfectant for a period of time to destroy any bacteria, because you can't autoclave it because it would incinerate, like it would burn. Okay? Does that make sense to everybody? Does anybody have questions on the difference between sanitization and disinfection? Because they are very different, if you're picking up on that, hopefully. Now, sterilization. This is your third and final one. Process that destroys all forms of living organisms. It kills everything. It kills everything. Okay? In disinfection, it only kills pathogens and microorganisms, right? Sanitization kills everything. Sterilization by autoclave, chemical sterilization, or dry heat sterilization. I'd like you to look in the back of the room. Next to the refrigerator is a little silver box. Do you see it on the counter there? That is a dry heat sterilizer. Okay? So what we will be doing is we will be putting instruments into that machine, and we will be running it through the cycle to kill the bacteria and everything using dry heat, okay? These can be really dangerous, and you need to be very careful. So, really quick, what is disinfection? Okay. What's sanitization? That's sterilization. What's sanitization? What are the three things that we just covered? Sanitization is the process of washing and scrubbing to remove materials.
Disinfection is process by which
Yes, process disinfection is the process that kills disease-producing microorganisms and pathogens. And then sterilization is the process that destroys all forms of living organisms. These are something that you all need to memorize. This is very important, okay? As a medical assistant or any professional in healthcare, at some point in time, you will encounter these processes. I mean, heck, even if you go to work at a tattoo shop, you're going to have to use an autoclave. You're going to have to use the disinfection and sterilization and sanitization process even there. There are tons of jobs in the world where these processes come into play. If you work in food prep, if you prep food, you do 2 out of the 3, you know? So really pay attention to what that stuff means. Autoclaving. Articles must first be sanitized. So before you can put something in an autoclave, you have to sanitize it. You have to scrub it to remove debris off of the material. Why is that important? Anybody have a guess? It's important because you don't want to leave blood or bodily fluids on the equipment and then cook it on there, because that's essentially what you're doing, is cooking the instrument, right? You don't want to leave flecks of flesh on a piece of material or a piece of equipment and then have it cook onto there, right? I'm getting some funny faces here when I said pieces of flesh. Yes, there will be pieces of flesh. Okay. Articles must be first sanitized. So then you're going to wrap articles in autoclave paper or cloth wrap. I will show you how to do this. Several items may be wrapped together. You want to be careful, though, that things aren't overlapping and that water doesn't sit in the instruments, because it can cause these instruments to rust. Several items may be wrapped together with a gauze square in between them to prevent or to ensure that each item gets cleaned. Take caution not to wrap it too loosely or tightly, and may use an envelope packing. I'll show you those as well. And then an indicator tape to ensure quality control. In that video, we saw her wrapping instruments using a little indicator, right, that she put into the package. That's how you know that that autoclave hit the temperature that it needed to hit for the length of time that it needed to be at to ensure that that package is sterilized properly. So here you can see there's the autoclave wrapping tape. I actually have some in the back. I'll show you when we get into that. There's a surgical instrument with a cotton ball in between it to keep it from closing in the process so that it sterilizes all the way through. And then, but it's pre-sanitized, so that hemostat somebody had sutures removed with, right? So then they go in and they brush the blood off of the hemostats, right, in the sanitization process, and then they put it in for the autoclave. And then you can see the indicator that says, yes, it's sterilized, no, it's not. Permeable autoclave wrapping paper. Why is it important that it's permeable? What does that mean? What does permeable mean? It means it can go through it. So if it's permeable, it means that the air, it's porous, that things can transport through it, right? Chemical sterilization is used for sharp items and instruments that would otherwise dull. So back in the old days, they would have a jar with like a germicide in it, and they would stick reused needles in the germicide, and they would leave it in there in between patients. Yeah, it's gross, right? Now we use disposable needles, so we don't have to deal with that. But rubber or vinyl items that cannot withstand autoclaving heat, those absolutely, suction syringes, bulbs, stuff like that, those absolutely get put into germicides or chemicals for sterilization. Cover the item completely with the solution. It should remain in the solution for an exposure time recommended by the manufacturer of the piece of equipment. I don't have any rubber pieces of equipment that I'll be demonstrating that with, but you get the gist, right? How many of you have little siblings and you've seen those bulb sucking syringes? Like they stick up the noses to get the snot out. That would be something you would use the chemical to sterilize, okay? Dry heat. So this is what we have. Take note of this because you'll all be expected to figure this out at some point on your own. Dry heat sterilization is used for sterilizing instruments with sharp blades. Now, I don't have any instruments with sharp blades because this is a school, but just as a heads up, that's what they normally would be used for. Scissors, scalpels, etc. I do have scalpels, but I don't have blades for the scalpels, so you don't have to worry about injury or risk there, but you'll get to see what the holder looks like without the blade in it. Time consuming, it does take 1 to 2 hours at a temperature of 350 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 176.6 degrees Celsius. I will teach you how to convert from Fahrenheit to Celsius when we get further into the school year, but for right now, it gives you the conversion itself. Depending on what it is, so it takes about 1 to 2 hours. Spores can still be a threat with this method because some spores can live in really high heat, okay? That's why ultimately the steam and pressure method is more effective, but for sterilizing instruments with sharp blades, this is the best route. Not a way to sterilize items made of rubber because rubber does melt at a certain temperature. And these ovens, these dry heat sterilization machines get up to 350 degrees for an hour to 2 hours. How many of you bake at home, right? You know how to turn on the oven? You know how to make pizza rolls in the oven? What do you do, about 400, 410 on those? Okay, well, the microwave still has to get pretty hot too, right? So this gets up to 350. You open the door on that autoclave, it'll burn your face off. It's hot. You have to be really careful. There's a lot of precautions that go into place, okay?